Claude Code just dropped routines, and this is changing the game. If you've been running scheduled tasks with Claude Code, sometimes you come to find that in the morning, in the afternoon, or whenever you've got your task scheduled for, you come back and you can see they haven't fired. You see that they ran into an error, they couldn't access an API key, whatever the case may be. And this can be because your laptop wasn't on, which was a major downfall of the scheduling, or it could be because it ran into an error. Now with routines, what we can do is that we don't need to have our laptop on, and we can run it through Claude's cloud infrastructure. So this means your laptop can be shut and you're still going to be able to automate those tasks that you weren't able to do on your scheduling. What this also allows us to do, which platforms like NAN, Make, Zapier, things like that, is this puts an agentic layer around our automations and means that if something goes wrong, the agent should have the access to the tools and the capabilities that it needs to fix it. So if something goes wrong in NAN, a lot of the time this means that the workflow will just stop and break. So this can mean you can spend a lot of time on NAN bulletproofing these workflows, but instead with routines we can just give a one-shot prompt, which still has to be detailed, but we can one-shot it and make sure these routines run all the time. So today I'm going to be running through what the routines are, what the good parts are, what the bad parts are, and how we actually set them up for ourselves. So what is a routine? So as I mentioned, a routine is an automated agent which you can run on Anthropic's cloud service rather than on your own laptop. You can either run these on a routine schedule, so this can run every hour, every day, whatever the case may be, or this can be triggered by another event. This means you don't have to leave your laptop open, you can just set up the routine and then get about on your business. So each routine contains 4 different things, and the first thing that we want to be looking at is the prompt. So these ideally want to be a single shot prompt. We want to give our prompt enough detail that the agent can do whatever it needs to do. If it runs into any errors, that it can assess these and fix these on the spot. It doesn't need to come back to us for information. If it does, then this kind of defeats the point of having a routine in the first place. The next thing we have is our GitHub repo. So we'll come onto this in a bit, but we can't run our routines on our local infrastructure. We have to be connected to a file set that we've uploaded to GitHub, so through the cloud. And Claude is going to clone these fresh every single run. Now we can also connect different connectors to there. So we can connect Slack, NAN, Gmail, whatever the case may be. So the different applications that you use within your business, you can connect to these routines. And then we have our trigger. So this can come in the form of a schedule, an API call, or a GitHub event. These are the 3 different options that we can have to actually set off our routine. So what actually happens when we spin up a routine? So what Claude does is it gets a copy from the cloud, from the workspace that you've connected it to. It then does all the processing and these 2 then he connectors that you've connected up, and then that session gets closed and archived. So this means you can go back and review the session at any point. If I go into Claude Code, I'm going to go here into our routines and we can see what it actually looks like when we want to set up a new routine. So you want to go on new routine and it actually has to be remote. If you set up a local routine here, it's just going to be a regular scheduling. So you want to set up a remote routine, name it, and in the instructions, this is where we want to put our one-shot prompt. So you want to make sure these are really detailed and the agent has all the information it needs to complete the task if it runs into any errors. Now, like I mentioned, there is different ways that we can trigger our routine. We can do it on a schedule. So I believe the most often you can do is hourly, so every hour. But you can do it daily, weekdays, weekends, whatever the case may be. But there are different ways to trigger as well. So we can also do it through an API, or we can do it through a GitHub event as well. So there's three different ways that we can trigger this routine. Now we also have our connectors here. So these are some connectors that I had set up. But if we want to add a connector, we can literally make sure that we go into our customize section here, connect this up through our MCPs, and then we can add it into the specific routine that we want to have that connected to. So for example, if I want to do a routine where I want to analyze my latest YouTube videos and then send an email off to myself, what I'm going to want to do is add my Gmail connector here to send me an email. For the repository, we want to go onto the select a repository part here, and you can see that it has access to different GitHub repos that I have where I've connected my GitHub to. So let's just say I'm going to select my AIOS workspace, and I'll come on to why this isn't actually a good idea in just a moment. But my AIOS workspace is a massive file structure, which is essentially the 2.0 version of me, my personal assistant, knows everything about my business. And you actually don't want to give a massive workspace like this to a routine, because these routines are limited to how much memory they can have, and you don't want to overload it with unnecessary context. So it can be a good idea for these routines to actually set up individual agent workspaces, so that these agents only have the context they need to know for the routine that they're carrying out. So once you've connected up your workspace, there's also another part here where we have permissions. And in our permissions, this basically tells our agent what permissions it has to access through our workspace that it's going to clone. Now you want to be careful with this, because if you click on here, it's going to give the agent permissions to make changes to that GitHub repository. Okay, so now we've looked at what a routine is, how we kind of set them up in Claude Code, and you can do that, by the way, through all the different ways that you access Claude Code. So that could be through the terminal, that could be through the desktop application, or that could be through the web. Now let's look into what the actual differences are between a routine, a schedule, and a loop. So for our routine, what this does is this runs on the cloud. We have a minimum interval of 1 hour, so that's the most often you can run routines. And it's good for things like nightly code reviews, daily triage, GitHub event reactions. And we don't have to have our laptop on. And this is the real big key of routines. For desktop tasks, it has to run on your machine, so it can't run on the cloud. The minimum interval is every 1 minute, so this is an advantage, as we can run these a lot more often. And it has access to our local files, faster polling, and custom scripts. But this does require our laptop to be on. So there is a time and place for both scheduling and routines. And then with loops, these are in individual active sessions. So these have no limits, and these are good for watching a deploy in real time or monitoring while you work. But for these, you have to have a session open. So even one step beyond having your laptop on, you have to have an active session open. So really, when you're setting up your routines, you need to ask a few questions. Does my machine need to be on, and how often does it need to run? Now, like I mentioned, there's 3 ways to run a routine. You can do it on a schedule, so this would be hourly, daily, weekly, whatever the case may be, via an API. So when you set up a routine, you actually get your own HTTP endpoint. Another agent or another workflow can make a post request to this endpoint and trigger that routine. And the final way is on GitHub events. So if something changes in your GitHub repo, this can then go ahead and trigger that routine. What is the routine function good for? So like I've mentioned throughout this whole video, it's good for tasks that need to be on a schedule that don't require your laptop to be on. So we can run these through the cloud. But what it's also useful for is for tasks that need judgment. So if you've built many automations in NAN or Make, you'll know that if something a little bit different happens, this can break the whole workflow. But what a routine allows you to do is that this is the agentic layer that can sit on top of this workflow and manage if there's any mistakes and make sure of the appropriate routing that needs to be done if anything happens. So like I said, for a routine, we write a prompt and then Claude figures out the logic. But for NAN, Make, Zapier, these kind of automation tools, you build the visual workflow and the tool follows. And this is the main advantage here, is the judgment calls. It's strong for Claude. If something goes wrong, Claude can adapt and based off its instructions and what it's reading. But for NAN workflows, Zapier, Make.com, there aren't any. These are deterministic, and if something goes wrong, the whole workflow breaks. Now, there's a few other things we consider here. The kind of integrations that you have with routine is limited to what Claude's built into their MCP infrastructure. But in NAN, we've got quite a lot. We've got 400 plus pre-built connectors. So to summarize this up, there is a time and place for both. There's a time for Claude and there's a time for NAN. So let's go into our final 3 sections. What's good about routines, what's not so good, the gotchas, and some quick references before you get cracking on with your own routines. So it runs without you. That's the main advantage to all this. This runs on the cloud rather than on your local machine. It means your laptop doesn't have to be on. There's 3 different trigger types. So there's 3 different ways that we can make these routines go. We don't need to configure any code like we might do on another automation platform. We have full agent capability and every run is logged. So if something goes wrong, we can go back and review what happened. So what are the gotchas? Because there are a few, and when I try to set up my own routines, there are a few things you need to keep in mind. So this is a research preview, so there's things that still need to be done, and it's not full production ready yet. One of the big disadvantages with routines is that they can only run every hour. So these can't run every minute, every 10 minutes for some automations that you might need to run very often. There's also no memory between each of the runs. So Claude will take a clone of your repository and that session, and it'll work in that session, but the next time that routine runs, it has no memory of what happened in the last run. And there's also daily run limits. So if you're on the Pro plan, you only get 5 runs a day. If you're on the Max plan, you get 15 runs a day. And if you're on the Team and Enterprise plan, you get 25 runs per day. These also aren't shareable, so you're not able to share these with your different teammates in your organization. These are only available on your individual account. And finally, routines don't have access to your local files. So they can only access what's on GitHub and anything that you upload there. So they're not going to be able to access any of your local files. So to summarize, routines are great and they definitely have filled a hole that scheduling and NAN workflows didn't cover before. But they do have their downsides. They're still in a research preview. You can't run them more often than every hour, and they can only access files that are in your cloud. So if you guys want access to this PDF that I've just been running through, I'm going to put this in my school community, so head over there to get access to that. If you did find this video useful, hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll be back in my next video for some more Claude Code tutorials.